I've already introduced myself, Duke. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? I've told everyone about the project that we've been working on in terms of, initially we worked with you on some of the design issues on your most recent application, and now we're starting to work with you on some of the usability and user experience effect and seeing whether or not those things worked. And so why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll get moving.
Can you hear me now, Phil?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, Duke. Just go ahead and introduce yourself and what Mobile MedSoft is about.
Hello, everyone. This is Duke Yetter. I'm the CEO at RNA Holdings, which is the holding company for Mobile MedSoft. We are a healthcare provider of pharmacy systems and for the long-term care industry and for the retail industry, as well as we write mobile applications based on Apple products and some Android products that we provide to long-term care nursing homes, assisted living centers, as well as they interface to various pharmacy systems. We've been in business about 35 years. This is a new venture for us in the last couple of years of getting into mobile apps. We're an authorized Apple reseller, so we pretty well can sell everywhere, and being a value-added reseller, we adapt Apple's products in with our products. We're also an Oracle value-added reseller and a Dell value-added. So I hope to give you a little bit of background on that.
Okay. What I'm going to do, Duke, is kind of walk through a presentation, but it'll be more of a conversational mode where, I may bring you in, and to talk about some of the stuff that we're doing with you guys along the way. What I'm first going to talk about is usability and user experience and why they're important, and some of the differences between in those things for web apps versus mobile apps, and then talk a little bit about measurements that we can use for usability and UX in terms of taking benchmarks and then using those benchmarks and working to improve them. And then, we're going to kind of talk a little bit more specifically about the project that we've been working on with you in terms of working with you on the design and development and improving the usability of your newer applications that you just talked about.
Sure.
So first of all, I'll dive into what usability is, how it's a little bit different than user experience, and why it's important. I guess, one of the things that's really changed everything is the cloud, and the cloud is really synonymous with mobile these days because, you can't really store a lot of data on your mobile phone, so your data has to reside somewhere, and the processing power on the mobile is also limited, so that has to be processed somewhere. So along with that comes a subscription pay model, and with the subscription pay model, behavior and expectations of users have changed. So, they used to buy software in a little shrink-wrap package and bring it home and spend $500, and then they'd be stuck with it. But now, they pay, maybe pennies per transaction or $20 a month or something like that, and maybe they sign up for a year subscription or no subscription and just pay by the month. And if they don't like you or don't like what your application can do for them, then they just find another. So, Duke, why don't you talk about how you guys decided to move into the pay-by subscription model and what drove you in that direction?
Sure. Well, folks, the primary thing, as with most businesses, you provide a service, and in our type of business, filling prescriptions and doing adjudication of claims and sending them out to the insurance company, and at the end of the month, we would bill our customers. And then hopefully our customers pay us within scheduled time frame after they receive the invoice. Healthcare has always seen reductions nationwide in the United States. I imagine some of you folks are outside of the U.S., but so we're constantly have to chase our customers for payment. So what we did was when we started designing our new application in the mobile environment, we decided to do what we approach what we call like a toll tag. That being that you basically, and it's real simple the way we came up with this idea, and it's not anything new or novel. It's basically you buy an iPad from us, you download an app from the App Store, and we engage and set it up. You give us a credit card, and we bill on a daily basis what we call PPD, which is per patient day. And we bill you up front for a certain amount of money, and when it hits a certain level, we rebill you on that credit card. So therefore, we have no accounts receivable, and it's basically like running through a toll tag or through a turnpike here in the U.S. When you hit a certain level and you meet that, they rebill your credit card. And that's the way we're starting to change our billing and move away from the monthly billing and waiting for payment.
Okay, I guess nobody likes accounts receivables. Okay, yeah, and I think that's probably driving a lot of businesses in this direction. So let me discuss a little bit about some basic usability concepts. So first of all, there's usability design, and everybody's kind of familiar with some of those terms, you know, like putting buttons in certain places or making buttons a certain size or certain colors and things like that. And then there's the effect of that. And so the effect of that, you know, in simple terms would be, you know, if you consider user behavior, maybe they would click on buttons more, or they would stay on a page longer, or something like that. And then you get to user experience, and the user experience is the result of the efficiency and effectiveness of them being able to use the application. Like for instance, in Duke's example, you know, where they're filling prescriptions or something like that, it might be, you know, how many buttons they have to press in order to fill that prescription, or how many forms they have to fill out, and the different fields on those forms if they're easy to fill out. But also what goes into the user experience are many other factors that are a result of their satisfaction, their overall levels of satisfaction with not only the application but the company's whole projection of quality, and many other things that go into user experience. And I'm just going to talk on this point a little bit more in just a minute. So in terms of mobile apps, you know, you think about when you start with the design, you think about, you know, is it a conversion of an existing app? What will the mobile application do, and what functions will a user really access when you design a mobile app? So especially if you're coming from a web app and you're converting and giving users access to your web app via a mobile phone, whether it be a mobile website or an actual native mobile application on the phone, you know, you probably don't want to give users the full functionality on the mobile phone. They're certainly not going to do certain things on a mobile phone, and also you don't want to crowd your screen, and because the screen real estate is really valuable. So those are many of the factors that are going to go into your design. And then after you do the design, then you're going to want to evaluate whether that design is suitable or not, and whether or not that meets your criteria. You're going to release the software, and then you need to test and evaluate again to see if you're getting the right results. And then maybe after you analyze those results, you get back to saying, oh shoot, we need to change some things in your design. So some of the things, you know, you think about in terms of usability from a design perspective are the terms understandable? Is it learnable, right? So, you know, can a user pick up your application and learn it very, very quickly? You know, I've downloaded some apps, and, you know, some of them are just so difficult to figure out that I just end up just scrapping them and never using them again, right? You know, is it operable? Can I do what I want to do? Is it pleasing to the eye in terms of attractiveness and colors and things like that? And can I navigate around and do what I want to do? And of course, the all-important responsiveness in terms of performance. mobile performance is now becoming a big issue, and that's not the subject of today, but that's also one of the things that goes into the design of the application. So after you do the design, then you have what happens from the user's point of view in terms of if that design works for them, right? So they're going to be operating in their own environment, and they're going to be wanting to do a certain task. So in Mobile MedSoft's example, for their application, they want to have nurses be able to check in on a patient and record data. And so the effect of the design would be, well, can they do their job the way that they was designed to be? Can they do it with making as little mistakes as possible? And are they satisfied in terms of using the application versus something else or many other things? And so, you know, I've put these terms in red because they're really important. And so specified users, specified goals, and a specified context of use. And so when you think about those terms, you know, especially, you know, when we've been working with Duke at Mobile MedSoft, you know, think about, you know, what are the specified users and objectives and tasks that the users, for instance, in the nursing home, Duke, maybe you can talk a little bit about, you know, what are these people trying to do when they're using your application?
Well, when you see the screens later on through this session, you'll see that what we did when we designed this thing was we tried to make it a mobile platform that is basically a patient care coordination system. So basically, if you were to walk into a long-term care facility, and it could be anywhere, anywhere in the world, a lot of them are similar, you walk up to a nurse's station or nurse's desk. What we tried to do was take the nurse's desk and mobilize it, but make it look very similar to what a nurse would see on her desk. So it makes it very user-friendly, very easy to understand, and just about anybody can pick it up, and they know what the feature is and what the function is because it looks just like their desk except it's on an iPad. So that was basically our goal, was to make it as easy as possible to use and easy to understand. And many a times we've had people just yank it out of our hand and say, well, let me play with it. We know it is, so we get this.
Okay. I just want to just point out that, you know, in the panel there is a questions tab, and if anybody wants to bring any, you know, have any questions, they can ask them casually. Let's see here. Here we go. So, you know, after they use the application, then they're going to be satisfied or not, and that is one of the biggest components of user experiences. The satisfaction is kind of a nebulous, or you could say subjective measurement, but we've got ways to measure those kind of things as well. And it's important to realize that user satisfaction or user experience is something that starts in the very beginning of when the customer or user is exposed to your company, and that means everything from, you know, your marketing materials all the way through to the product and the customer service. All that is included in user experience. So you could have a really perfect product, but maybe it doesn't match the marketing material, and maybe you have poor customer service, and therefore the overall user experience may be just average. So that's important to realize, that user experience is really something that encompasses not only time, something that's accumulated over time, but more than just the application itself. So in terms of, you know, actually using the application, some of the things that go into a user experience designer's toolkit, for instance, in terms of thinking about buttons, their placement, and prioritizing tasks. So it's like for some, in a very simple e-commerce applications, you want a user to buy things, right? So and you want to steer them in that direction. Now, Duke's application is a little bit different. They've got many tasks on the nurse's workstation, so, and many important things. So they're not going to have, for instance, a distinctive red button that sticks out that says buy this. They may have different colors that nurses are used to. And so when you're trying to get a user to be effective or accomplish a task, of course you want to remove any friction or something that slows them down. So that friction could be confusion. It could mean buttons are placed in a place that they are not familiar with, or it could be maybe they don't understand the words or words that they're not familiar with. One more focus on the context. Some people say cache is king. Well, I think user context is king. And so if you look at this little example on the right, it shows really how important it is in designing the application for your user and where they are from and what environment they're in. If you look at these two examples here, one of them says shopping cart, the other one says shopping basket. And so people in the UK are used to shopping baskets, whereas people in the US are used to shopping carts. And so they would have a different behavior or probably a different click-through rate in terms of buying stuff based on these little choice of words that makes a difference. So let's look at a couple examples of right and wrong in terms of usability. You can see here it's really obvious that Virgin Mobile wants you to press on the apply here online. So that's a really big red button. So they're driving user behavior and making it easy for a user to do something. So position really affects a user effectiveness. Color also creates emphasis. So you want to make sure if you want a user to do something or possibly not make a mistake in doing something, then you want to make it very obvious something that you want them to do or not do. And this real simple example here, I pulled up my Yahoo profile, and it's very obvious here what LinkedIn wants people to do. They want people to click on that full profile because if they click on that, it's going to ask them to open an account. So that's clearly the yellow really sticks out. Okay. So another thing with color, we don't want to overuse it. So if you look at this page here, you can't see exactly what these guys want a user to do. If you look really closely, they probably want users to click on the quote button, but it's really unclear. And so they improved it a little bit, but you can see another factor here is that even though they have the quote for emphasis, there's many of them. So it's not clear exactly which one they really want somebody to do. Size matters. So if you look at the different buttons from before, you saw that they were different sizes. And so let's look at this here. Size communicates priority. So if you look at this thing, the Firefox page, it's really obvious they have one button and it's really, really big, and that's what they want you to do. And you notice the color, everything is orange, but the green really sticks out. So they use color and size to emphasize what they want someone to do. Here's another example using size and color together. You can see in this Twitter, they want the green really sticks out. They want you to get started now. And then you have a combination of red and green. It's a little bit confusing. So there's no priority because the red and the green both stick out. But then if you combine those two, you can see that they're both important, but because of the emphasis on the size in addition to the color, you can see that they really want you to press on the green one as in preference to the red one. Little changes can make a small difference. So if you think about, there's something called multivariate testing where you change one little thing and then you go back and see what happens in terms of the behavior. And Laura Ashley, if you take a look at what they did over time, they were able to discover that if they put this green button right under with it says checkout right underneath the dollar amount, they were able to increase their checkout rates by 11%. And so before, the checkout button was over to the left and confused with the home page, and it wasn't green. So all of these little tiny experiments that you can do in terms of going to the design. I'm going back to that cycle that I mentioned earlier, going to the design, changing something, and then seeing what effect it has on your actual results, and then going back again and changing things. So let's talk a little bit more about mobile in particular. And so I was just showing some web pages, but let's go talk about mobile. So when you go from desktop to mobile, there's a couple things that are really important. One of them is there's really limited screen real estate, right? So we're going to have to limit our functionality, and the accessibility of those functions is really important. And so unless we get the usability design correct, then the effect and the UX is going to really suffer. So here is, again, Laura Ashley's page on a mobile phone, and you see that they've carried over that green button function, that green button design that they learned onto this here, in terms of they want somebody to click on add to what they call the bag. I don't know if you can see that or not. And so, but what they didn't do correctly is that you can see, remember we talked about the size and the color, and you have add to cart, pin it, and share. Now add to cart is a little bit bigger, and it is green, it's a different color, so that gives the user a sense of consistency in terms of buy, add to cart, but it is close in the size to the others. So, you know, for me, I think that's a little bit off in terms of design. I don't think that they should put that pin it and share that close to the add to cart. They are consistent, though, you know, with their green, and it's pretty obvious what they want you to do. And green is definitely a clear signal to buy. Then they also have a mobile app. And so if you look on their native mobile app, they have equal size buttons. So it's clear here that they don't care whether or not you shop for girls wear or fashion. So there's no priority or importance in weighting given to what they want you to buy. You can buy anything you want. What's unclear to me is home. So most people are familiar with the home button, so that could be confusing. You know, if I were to work with them on that, I probably would call that, you know, furnishings or something like that, or some other word other than home, because home has other meanings. So we have to remember where users come from and their expectations from other applications, and be careful with our wordings. Here we are again. It's really clear what they want you to do. They want you to choose one of these buttons. They're all equal weights. And here's something that's really interesting. The Buy Me button has the same color and the same size, and therefore to the user the same equal importance as sharing. So that's definitely a no-no. They do make it convenient or easy to choose sizes, and this is really important for a mobile app, is being thumb friendly. So it's really, you can move your thumbs across this little scroll here and choose the size. So thumb friendly is a big thing for mobile applications. Again, they made a mistake here. You know, share and buy me are equal priority, no difference in color. Same thing here. Empty the basket or check out. Those two things are the same priority according to their design. Really strange. Okay, here's another one, just really simple colors, easy to see what they want you to do. And what's important in here is that the icons at the bottom of the screen, with this application and many applications, there's a consistent placement of the major icons at the bottom of the screen. So this is similar to like when we got used to using Windows applications, where you have the file open on the uppermost left side of the screen. So it kind of sets the de facto standard for what users expect in terms of how they're going to use their application. So even if you were to come up with a design that was much better, if a user's expectations and their what they're used to using is already set, then you're kind of it takes a lot of shifting to get them off of those expectations. Here's another example with Fidelity, where they again are very thumb friendly. And here you can see number one, the icons on the bottom, and number two, the really clear thing they want you to do, preview and order. Here's Yelp. Again, the consistency of the buttons on the bottom, very clear. Okay, so let me give it just a real quick summary of some usability design best practices. One of them is quickness, right? So you want users to be able to navigate very quickly and simply, thumb-friendly, visibility in design, and we discussed about the size and priority and colors and placement of buttons. You want them to be able to complete what they want to do, and you want it to be seamless from your main app. So for your main app, if your mobile app is also complementing your web app, then you want it to be seamless with that application as well. And the last one, the second bullet up from the bottom, is the context. And we talked about how users in the UK are used to different types of terms and buttons. And so that's going to be really important when you design your application. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with Duke and his application. He has a very special application for long-term care. And so his context really drives the design of his application. So let me turn it over to Duke, and we'll talk about what he wants to achieve, or what he has tried to achieve in terms of the usability of the application, in particular for long-term care facilities and for those users which are nurses and doctors and things like that. So nurses and doctors, of course, have a different background, different expectations, and they're used to different things. Very special, a very special domain. So it's not the same as somebody trying to buy a curtain or a couch. And Duke, maybe I'll turn it over to you, and you can talk a little bit about Mobile MedSoft and talk a little bit about iMedTablet in particular, and some of the design things that you thought about when you're going through the design.
Okay. Well, we called this, we started on this project a couple years ago, and it came from the fact that when you deliver drugs to a patient in a long-term care facility, typically elderly patients can be up to 10 drugs that they take during a month period. And one of the things that happens often is during what they call the med pass, when the nurses dispense the drugs to those patients and they go down the hall with their med cards, sometimes they miss the drug. I had a friend who had a patient in one of his facilities, and it was a diabetic patient, and the nurses missed med pass of giving that patient their insulin shot. Well, what happened was, the fatal mistake happened was the patient passed away. And to this day, he's still in a mess with lawsuits and everything else. So when we designed this system, we designed into it that it would constantly alert the nurse on the mobile device that you can't miss the med pass. Constantly harass the hell out of you, basically. It should flash at you and all that stuff. So what we did was we tried to make a mobile device, and it actually got patient data. So we had to use a cloud, and we currently use the Microsoft Azure cloud to store the data. And so any data that is entered into the iPad at the facility is uploaded to the cloud and then transmitted to the pharmacy system, and updates the pharmacy system with regard to the patient's drugs. And if the pharmacy enters the patient and enters the drugs on there, it's transmitted up to the cloud and then back down to the iPad. So the iPad basically has access to everything. We can download limited patient data to the iPad so that if there is a catastrophe coming, like a hurricane that hit and they go to transfer those patients to another location outside of there, the patient's data can translate with their traveling with them, transport with them on the iPad. And then they can reconnect, and they can connect either over Wi-Fi network. A whiteboard where messages pop up, you have a printer, you have a telephone that can make telephone calls, you have a camera, you can take pictures of the patient or any wounds that they may have or anything. You have a file cabinet. You touch the file cabinet, it opens up, and you can pull up data on that patient that's been scanned in that came in from the hospital. A library shelf. You click on the library shelf, and you'll see that later on in here. I think I've got a picture of it. You can go out on the web and look up different things. Go to Medicare.com or drugs.com or anything like that. You can click on the census button, and it'll bring up the census, the whole list of all the patients in that facility. You have chat buttons, help buttons. The chat button's interesting because you can talk between iPads. So a lot of times a responsible party will come in to check on their loved one in a facility, and they'll want to talk to the nurse that specifically worked with that patient. If she's not around, another nurse can hit the chat button and find her and talk to her and say such and such is here. The pill bottles down at the bottom, that's where they can do their MedPass and dispense drugs and all that good stuff and administer the drugs. The chart book is the medical book on that patient. So then we go to the next screen, Phil. And
okay. I think it's important to mention that this is, specifically designed for a nursing station. This is exactly what they would have.
Yeah, and this is what they see. This is what they work with every day. So all we did was digitize their workstation and put it on an iPad. It made it easy to understand. I mean, it's very simple. I mean, you pick a resident, you touch the resident button up there, and then you can enter the first 3 characters, and it hits the cloud immediately. And you can look up, say, Betty Smith, and we click on Betty Smith, and she'll pop up. You can also, on this screen, rather than type in Betty Smith, you can hit the little microphone button under there and say Betty Smith, and it'll hit the database. It'll put it in there, and then it'll search it. So you don't even have to type it in. So, okay, go to the next screen.
Okay.
So when they click on the MedChart book, the medical book, the first thing that pops up for Betty Smith is what we call the face sheet. And that's what nurses and doctors are used to when they go into a facility. They'll pull out the book on this patient. And the first thing that comes up, you'll see a line of tabs on the right side. which are color coordinated that nurses are used to. You got the face sheet, you got the physician order, you got the MAR, which is the medical administration record. You've got the assessment sheets, their notes, and any audits. And then across the bottom are the basic information sheets that are associated with that patient, their contacts, any financial data, the demographics, in other words, where they were from, what their previous job was. LOS is length of stay, how many times they've been admitted and discharged. And you can see we have the patient's picture. And when Phil was talking earlier about a home button, well, most people know that that little home button up there in the far left-hand corner, that represents home to us. There's many other features on here that you just go around and touch. The little green buttons for the telephone. If you touch that, it'll automatically dial that number. So we tried to make things just touch-sensitive, easy to understand, and most nurses and most doctors get it right from the get-go when they look at this thing. They understand it's easy to walk through. Phil, you want to add anything at all?
I was just going to say that I think it's important that, previously I talked about being thumb-friendly, but in your case, you have an iPad app, so it's a pretty big screen, and it doesn't have to be as thumb-friendly. I know that you also have apps that are just for iPhones, and in that case, you have a lot less functionality, a lot more limited screen real estate, and you are able to use your thumbs.
Right.
So I just wanted to point that out. Let's see here. Going to the next screen here, the Allergies tab screen.
So it's real. This is just another part of the face sheet where they touch the allergy button down there in the bottom right, and it comes up with what the resident is basically allergic to. And then you have other, whether it's environmental, food, or whether it's a general allergy and all that type of stuff. So it's very simple.
Okay.
You touch the tab and it pops up. It goes out and retrieves the data from the cloud and pulls it down.
Good. Can you talk a little bit about, I'm showing the diagnosis screen now, can you talk a little bit about the colors on the right and how they correspond to doctor charts or stuff like that nurses are used to?
Well, when you go into, in the U.S., you go into most medical facilities or anything like that, when you pull out a patient chart, and they have specific things that nurses are used to. Red is a high priority thing. It's also the easiest for most people to see that aren't colorblind. And they know that's where all the pertinent data is. The orange is for physician orders, the medical administration record. These are tabs of the old paper days. I mean, one of the big things that goes on in healthcare today is reducing paper and trying to go paperless. So what we did was we took the old forms that they were used to looking at and the colors that they were associated with the tabs in their charts, and all we did was duplicate it. So we tried to make it similar to what they already are used to. This is a screen where you've got, go ahead.
Yeah, Duke, we have a question for you in the audience. They're asking if your application is targeted for the iPad market in particular.
Currently it is. It was designed around the iPad market. We have iPhone apps that are related to pharmacy where we wrote both on the Android and on the iPhone operating systems. We can convert it over and put it into a Droid, but we stuck with the iPad primarily in the beginning, primarily because of the security features that the iPad offers over the Android. The Android, Apple sandboxes their apps very well. I mean, you've got to go through a lot to get there. We were cognizant of that, so we decided to go with the iPad first, and the way you're able to broadcast updates across a network. They have a lot of neat features that Apple has in their operating system for us to be able to broadcast these various updates. And there's a lot of updates that you have to do in this environment when releasing these kinds of apps.
Okay. Is there anything about the medical administration record that does?
Well, this is the one I'm talking about where the facility lost the patient because they missed a drug pass. And you can see here where we alert right there, and it says missed. It can alert the director of nurses. You can see where next due is what the date is. You can click on those. It'll tell you the time, the actual time, but here it says at 8:30 on LASIK that it's due on Monday the 28th. Due now, which you can't see because this is on a regular screen, but on the iPad, due now is flashing. And it will not, it'll turn red if you missed it within a certain time frame. So this is important because when you go back to the first screen, you go down to the pill bottles. If you click on that, you can get every patient listed and what was due and when it was due.
Right. This next screen you said was fairly important as well.
Yeah, this is a typical assessment chart where they assess the patient on admission. They can pick and touch the screen on pain assessment, and that will open up into a bigger screen of the human body. They can start going around there and touching whether they've got any wounds or any breaks or fractures or any of that kind of stuff, and they can say where it is. Then they've got pain rating scales down there where you get a slider, and this is typical. That they have, I don't know whether I've seen this over, yeah, actually I have. I've seen this in China where you've got the funny faces and all that kind of stuff when I've been over there. So you can select the pain thresholds and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Anything particular about this here?
Yeah, the telephone, you can see where you can actually pick a doctor, and it'll automatically dial out and call the physician that's already pre-programmed into it. You can pick a pharmacy, or it can actually dial a number, and our customers pay us 2 cents a minute to be able to use that. But it's tied right into the iPad, and they can go out over the cell network, or they can go out over the wireless network and make a phone call. They don't have to run back to the nurse's station down the hall or down down on a different floor to be able to make a phone call or look something up. At the same time, they can take a picture. If there's a problem with a patient, there's a problem with a wound or something like that, they can take a picture and transmit it to the doctor. Or the doctor could log in and see this.
Wow, okay, that's really powerful. I guess this next screen would alert people if they need to take medicine.
Right. This is right there. It just tells you if you touch the button up the top of there where it says 742250, you can see that it pops up with a dashboard, and it immediately tells you what medications are missed on what patient, what are due now, and what are coming. And it's just a scrolling feature. You just run your finger up and down on it and swipe it.
Oh, okay.
The printer, you can print sheets. It'll go out and it'll actually print the physician order, and everything the doctor has ordered will pop up, and you can send it to a wireless printer. Something else that's important is that message center too, there in the center of the whiteboard. That'll constantly update too, reminding the nurses of what functions could be happening that day. There could be a birthday party, and they can post it on there so they know what's going on. Also, sticky notes down there. You see the different colored sticky notes. You can pick those and assign a task that at a certain time, and that sticky note will pop up at a certain time and flash on any screen to tell you got to go do something. So it's a little reminder system.
Well, it sounds like you're really trying to prevent them from forgetting things or making mistakes.
Well, the whole purpose of this application is patient care. The more quality patient care you can give, the better I think the application will be accepted, the better the patients will be, the better the facility will get discharges from hospitals and receive more patients because they're doing a better job. We also wrote this, even though there's different healthcare networks around the world, this thing can be programmed in different languages, even though we may not be able to do the pharmacy processing for that particular country. Patient care is patient care, and drugs are drugs. So they'll get administered the same drug. We may not be able to do the adjudication and the transmission of the insurance claim or the health claim in that particular country, but they still can take care of the patients and still keep track of it. So this was not written just specifically for the U.S.
Okay. So I think now we're going to get into some of the measurement things. And so first of all, we worked with you guys on the design, and now we're going to be working with you on assessing the results of that design to see if it was good or not, and if we were able to achieve the objectives that we wanted to get to. So what I'm going to talk about now is some of the usability measurements that you can set up in terms of measuring whether or not your design is effective. And so I'll return to this big picture in terms of design, effect, and user experience. And so, we've gone through the design. We did our best to adapt the design and put the buttons in the right place and so forth, and then we've released the product. And the next step is really to go and evaluate whether or not we achieved what we wanted to achieve in the design. And so, what this next slide shows here is just a real general usability or quality model, which is based on characteristics and subcharacteristics that we're looking for. So if you remember earlier when we talked about, button placement or button color or things like that, this is where those kind of things go into designing or defining usability for your application. And then you think about for instance, the product design. For instance, maybe we want to talk about navigation is important to us, and simpleness may be important. So for the iPad tablet, for instance, we wanted to make sure that things were always in the same place so that nurses wouldn't forget and make mistakes. And then we wanted to think about the colors that they're used to, right? And then, the position, so that if you notice on the right-hand side and on the bottom, the tabs were always the same, to have that kind of consistency. And the number of buttons is, of course, very important. So for the MedTablet application, it exactly simulated a nursing station. But for other, for instance, e-commerce applications, maybe there would be less buttons in order to show priority. Color usage, Duke talked about that a little bit in terms of showing what exactly is on a nursing station in terms of what they're used to, in terms of the doctor charts and things like that. So that's the design stage. And then we want to measure what is the effect of that design. And so when we do that, we think about, is the user effective? Are they efficient? Are they satisfied? And so forth. So here's a couple of definitions for that. And then we think about, how are we going to measure these things, right? So once you have a model of the things that are important for your applications, so for instance, can the nurse, in Duke's instance, can the nurse check on a patient and check on the medications for that patient for that day? How long does it take them to check on that? And how often do they forget, or things like that? Here are some examples of some sample measurements. For instance, the keystrokes, which can be measured from an inspection point of view. You can just use the application yourself and see, for instance, 5 keystrokes. But you can also measure the task completion efficiency from the user's point of view. How long does it take them to do that by collecting things in usability logs or web logs. And so here are some instances of ways to collect data. And here's an example of a heuristic evaluation. I'm speeding up now because I want to give participants a chance to ask some questions. We've also used a special way of usability logging where we collect data from the web app or from the mobile app and actually analyze it to see how users are behaving and whether or not they're completing things. Satisfaction surveys everybody is familiar with in terms of collecting whether or not they're satisfied. And then something really important, I think, that some people don't realize, that satisfaction is not the same thing as usability. So an application could be highly usable, but users may not be satisfied. So although they are related, they are different. So we're working with Duke now and setting up usability and UX measurements for Mobile MedSoft. And I just want to quickly conclude, that usability and user experience are fairly abstract concepts, but you can, if you work through it, you can define what they mean for your application and for your context and for your users. And is especially important for mobile apps because if a user can't figure out what you're doing or what your app is supposed to do, they will soon find somebody else. So it's important to define the model or what is important for you in your application and your users, and then figure out how to go out and measure it after you design to see if you're accomplished what you want to accomplish. And so I think now we'll turn it over to questions from the audience. Jan, are you there? Maybe I could turn it back over to you. We're actually, I just wanted, as a last note, I want to mention that we did work with Duke in the beginning in terms of designing his app and working together with him to design it, but also we're working with him in the after the fact in terms of measuring data and seeing if we were able to accomplish what we set out to do. So are there any questions from the audience? Feel free to type in, or here's another. Jan, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. There are a couple of questions, Phil. You can see them in the question pane.
Okay.
The first question is, what options do we have for mentally challenged people? How do you get the consent, NLP or a carer?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
Can you see the question how you type, Nassar? Nassar, would you like us to unmute your phone that you can type it yourself?
I see now. Okay. What options do we have for mentally challenged people, and how do you get the consent of a carrier? Is that what that is?
I think a person that takes care.
Do you have any idea about that, Duke?
I guess for mentally challenged persons, I'm not quite sure I understand the question, Phil. Read it again to me.
Well, it says, how do you, maybe we should just open up the mic, Jan. Can you do that?
Okay, I'll do that. Nassar, I opened your mic.
It's a shame that we don't speak.
Nassar?
Hello?
Hello, you're live now.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to find out on the iPad when the nurse goes to the patient, if the patient is mentally challenged, how do you get the consent and where do you record?
How do you get the consent?
Consent to give any medication and things like that, to start the care package.
The consent really is the prescription from the doctor. We'll receive a script from the doctor, whether it be electronic or whether it's faxed into the pharmacy, and at that point, that is the actual really basically the consent. If the patient declines the drug and does not want it to be administered, then that is noted on the iPad that they turn down the drug and the reason why.
Okay. Here in UK, we have a carer or a next of kin is a family member who usually says, okay, if this is okay or if this is not. Only if the patient is unable to provide the answers, not like, especially with this case as mentally challenged. That's the reason why I want to ask. Where do you record it? Is
right.
There
That on the drug order, that would be that have to get permission from the responsible party.
Right.
To be able to administer that drug.
Right.
Here's another question for you, Duke. They're asking how you handle the application updates and patches, future updates, things like that?
Well, with Apple, it's done through the Apple App Store. What we do is we do an update, and it can be downloaded and broadcast across the Apple App Store. Apple approves it, and there it can be broadcast. Or we can actually do it through a identification number, not the UDID on the iPad, but we can broadcast it out over a wireless network and do a broadcast of those iPads, do an update to those iPads.
Okay. Seems like a lot of people are interested in your app. Duke, the next question is about the confidentiality of the data, and the encryption, and what if they lose the iPad or something like that?
Well, first off, if they lose the iPad, it's 256-bit encrypted. Anything that goes on in there. But if they lose the iPad, as long as they don't have the ID to be able to log in under that user, and they take that iPad out of that facility, it's shut down. We can broadcast and close it off. It can also be closed off on an admin terminal. So if the iPad disappears, we can shut down the administrator of the facility, or our support people can actually close down the access to that iPad. There's no way they can get into it. It's a dead app. It's a dead app.
Yeah. The next question is also concerning data in terms of the updating of data on a central database and how that works in terms of the continuity for care. I guess different people accessing the same data and so forth.
I think Phil and Duke, this should be the last question. That's it.
Right. This is the last question.
What happens in that environment, folks, is the data is entered, is stored in the cloud. It's updated in the cloud, and it's broadcast down to the appropriate facility, either to the nursing home or the long-term care facility, where it be, and to the pharmacy system. So if the pharmacy is really kind of the center of the cog on this thing, because that's the most difficult part of the whole system, is the administration of the drugs and the drug interactions that take place between drugs to alert you that you can't give this drug with that drug because you're going to kill the patient. So if there's an update done at the pharmacy, it broadcasts up to the cloud and transmitted down to the pad to that patient data. So when you pull up that patient data, no matter what happens, whether it's updated in the facility or the pharmacy, it's still all the same data.
Okay. I think that was the last question, Jan.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us. We had quite a crowd. Please let me direct you to our blog.xbosoft.com, where you will find a recording of the website. Any other questions you can send to services@xbosoft.com, and we'll answer them as quickly as possible. Thank you very much, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks, Duke.
Bye, Duke.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.